My name is Martin. I will be your host for today, and today I have a rather fine showman of a gentleman by the name of Tim Kask, who is the contributing editor to the new foundation of TSR's Gygax magazine. He's a former history teacher, a Vietnam vet, all-round interesting individual. And Tim, in your own words, tell us a little bit more about you.
Well, you did a pretty good job. Well, I was the thing I'm proudest of is that I have been involved with D&D since '74 with Gary, and I went to work there when it was formed, and I started Dragon Magazine, and I'm still writing game adventures again today with a new company. So it's all come full circle. I went away for 22 years, and then I came back.
Okay, and could you tell us about the new TSR? How has the new TSR come about? How has it been formed?
Well, okay. First off, I need to define my position within the new TSR. I'm not. I'm a minor participant. Jason realized that the Wizards had allowed the trademark to lapse. With our trademark laws, you get so many years, and then if you don't renew it, you don't get the rest of the 35, 42, whatever it is now. It's changed since I was an active publisher.
Sure.
And so he did it, a title search, trademark search, whatever the lawyers do for that thing, and snapped it up. And now owned TSR Games, and he'd wanted to get to do something having to do with games. He'd been a magazine publisher in the music business and wanted to get back in, and that's when he approached me a year ago in March at GaryCon about the possibility of consulting. And I got to remember to look at the camera because I look like I'm staring at my feet. He asked me about consulting, and he offered a modest sum, but he asked for very little, and I said for that amount of money he could pick my brain or pick my nose or pick whatever else he wanted, because certainly I'd be glad to. And we quickly went through that, the agreed amount of time, and I said, I don't care, I'm having so much fun, and you guys are obviously so brilliant because you're taking so many of my suggestions to heart. So I just that's how I got there. I just published yesterday several places on Facebook. I spread it around. It's the Gygax magazine manifesto. What we're going to do. We want to celebrate gaming. That doesn't mean wargaming. It doesn't mean role playing. It does, but it's not exclusive. Studies show that children that play games in the home do better in school. They have better social skills. It's good time. It's time well spent with the family, doing family things, building bonds. Gaming gives strangers opportunities to meet each other and form friendships. It gives people that might not necessarily be inclined to be socially active a means of learning social skills. It makes for better, I'm repeating myself, makes for better students in schools. I saw that. It's the whole concept of gaming. We're going to try to go back to those wonderfully exciting days in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, up to the recession that kind of hit the game business in 85, 86 in there. When everybody's just playing all kinds of games. There was a lot of hope when it was announced. It was leaked. We did not plan for people to learn about it when they did it, how they did. That's another story altogether.
Yeah.
But it was planned to be all-inclusive, not just role-playing, not just minis, not just, but all of this, and family games and gaming-related articles to think about what gaming, our culture, our gamers' culture, not just 20 years ago I'd have said big overweight, sweaty guys in black T-shirts that hadn't showered for 3 days at the convention. That was gamer culture when I left. To a large degree, but it's changed so much now. The impact that role-playing and Dungeons and Dragons in particular, who simply started it, and it's been taken in so many wonderful directions since, the effect it's had on our culture. Just kind of celebrate gaming. No gamer that I have ever met only plays one game or one kind of game. And so we hope to be able to expose people who pick it up for the role-playing but see a really good board game, or something about this miniatures that it will appeal to them, because I think there's a lot of cross-pollination in all gamers. I started with board games when I was in the 6th grade, which was late 61 or early 62. And then I discovered miniatures in college. And then, of course, miniatures led to chainmail, which led to calling Gary Gygax late one night on Saturday night. And the rest is, as we say, history.
So who else is working with you at Gygax Magazine now?
Okay.
Who's on the staff?
Jason Elliott is the publisher. Luke Gygax, Gary's youngest son with Mary, and Ernie Gygax, Gary's oldest son with Mary, are involved as publishers and will be contributing. So far they've told some wonderful stories that we know people that are interested in the history of it. They've been telling stories about how Dad Gary used to spin tales for him at night and make up stories along the way. So you can see from that Gary was making up stuff like this a long time ago, and they have the unique perspective of lying there in the bed under the covers listening to these stories unfold. Both Luke and Ernie are very good game players. Luke is especially active promoting GaryCon as well. James Carpio is a younger man that I only met a couple of years ago at TotalCon in Boston. He's our games editor. He's kind of like our content editor. It's his job to see that we're hitting all the bases each issue. We were a little heavy on role-playing in the first issue because we asked people to give us stuff for free.
Yeah.
And that's where our contacts lay, was with role-playing people. And we're making every effort to prove that, no, we're not going to be just another role-playing magazine. We're going to do gaming. The concept that Gary and I had with the very first Dragon magazine, when we spun it out of Strategic Review, and we started with the 3 issues that when I took over, so we started reaching a field and talking about other games, good games. I'm glad to say that ethic is alive in Gygax magazine. We don't care if I don't think we're even paying attention about whether or not they're buying an ad from us.
Yeah.
The whole point is, hey, look at this neat game. We think it's pretty cool, and I'll bet some of you will too. Look at that great game. Hey, have you ever looked at this game in this way? So take some of the favorites, some of the old standards, and maybe a new look at them. Maybe someday a look at the evolution of train games from when we were putting crayon marks on plastic maps to, what they became with Sid Meier's on the computer. I've got a program going at my local library where I have a game Saturday, and I play games with the young kids in the neighborhood, just because it gets them in and gives them something to do, and it makes them think, and it creates higher levels of thinking. And if I'm successful, which I hope to be, I'm going to try and institute it in county-wide and give seminars on how other libraries can set it up, because it only takes one gamer. Just one gamer is all it takes to set something up like that. There's so many positive aspects to gaming, and so many new good things out there. In some point I was babbling and somebody wrote it down that we're going to respect the roots and nurture the shoots.
Yeah.
Let's look at the good stuff and respect it and see where we came from. But hey, look at all this great new stuff. Never going to waste space on a negative review. It's not enough time.
Yeah. So to go back a little bit, there was a time, of course, when TSR published quite a variety of different games. And if you look at the catalogues, D&D was just one game of quite a lot, really, wasn't it?
It was a one game, but it sold all the rest of them several times over. When we started, we could not, in the early days of the first TSR with Gary, people just would not believe that we did anything but fantasy. And we tried so hard. We put out a few really nice historical games that just got overlooked because they weren't fantasy. And Gygax magazine wants to go back where Dragon did and where Little Wars did before they were folded back together, where I did with Adventure Gaming after I left TSR. And that is that let's talk about all the good things of gaming, because the rising tide lifts all boats. And let's up with gaming. Let's enjoy it for what it is and look at some new things to look at. And the culture shock I suffered when I came back to Gen Con in 2006, I nearly needed a defibrillator. It was so different than what I remembered back when we were still doing Gen Con in the Horticultural Hall. But the new TSR is not the old TSR. They have nothing to do. No, Gary's IP remains Gary's IP, which is the property of his estate. We have no access to it whatsoever. We're not going to print out the new Greyhawk. We're not going to continue Legendary Adventures. Gygax magazine is free and independent to write about what we want. Right now, TSR has the new TSR, if you will, has no plans whatsoever to write the next best game. Foolish waste of time.
And what's the community response being behind Gygax magazine? Because it seems to have been very rapid, the response, and the unboxing event seemed to be, I saw some of the footage, there's like people everywhere. I mean, what was it like? And what's the response been? It
leaked. The Monday before Thanksgiving, it got leaked. Jason's original plan was that, and there's a secret page on Facebook that only 8 of us can access, because this is where we talked. His plan was to bring forth a magazine, complete, because distributors won't buy a proposal. Yeah. Artists and authors, once you've asked a favor, once you got to have something to show them that their trust in you is well spent. And at this point I had simply said that it was okay when it came time to solicit advertisers or to talk to some of the older writers and authors, that it was okay to say that I was involved in it if it would help them. So you could call on my acquaintanceship with them, and if you needed. Well, an advertising brochure went out, and there were 6 names listed on it, and those were Luke Gygax and Ernie Gygax and Jason Elliott and James Carpio and Jim Wampler, who was the art director, and mine. And it got leaked. Within 6 minutes of it being sent out to a mailing to several potential advertisers, it was on N-World. This is before N-World got hacked. And it just exploded. It truly went viral. Jason and Luke were both tied up in meetings that day, had no idea it was even going on. We did not have Susan Silver, our Twitter and our Facebook manager. We were just still 5-6 guys trying to put this thing together in secret. And so I eventually had to jump on and start steering stupid and silly idle speculations away from shoals of disappointment, if you will. And we couldn't have paid for that kind of buzz that it created. We could have spent $10,000 and not achieved the buzz and we're still not sure which potential advertiser leaked it, and we don't care now. Bless you, whoever you were. Don't
do it again.
Yes, don't do it again. But it just went berserk. And now we have a distributor lined up for number 2, both foreign and domestic. We're trying to get him to pick up some of number 1s and get them out there. We're working on that. I've not just Jason's bailiwick, and I've not spoken to him recently to see how we're doing on that. we've sold quite well. The subscription numbers are very encouraging. The single copy sales, I haven't checked on the PDFs yet. Our philosophy is that the PDFs will not become available until the people that buy the hard copies have them in their hand, smell the paper when they open it that first time. It's completely new. We want to preserve that. Going to the mailbox and getting your magazine, going in, sitting down, getting comfortable, and and reading your magazine. Whether you flip to the comics in the back or the table of contents in the front, whatever, we want to preserve that. And when we're reasonably certain that the majority of people will have received them, then the PDF goes available online. And that's going to remain that way. And we're having a little problem getting the iPad or iPod or I don't know, some tablet version thing. I don't know. We're having a little problem with that. But we intend to have it available for that.
Well, the magazine's got a very broad remit, obviously with the game coverage being so wide. Is the direction of the magazine going to continue to be that way? You're going to look at things like, because you're at a convention later this week as well, aren't you? So are you going to be doing convention coverage and the like as well?
No, being a quarterly, that's rather. We could in passing say, wow, we had a great time there. Or we could next time, when it's the quarterly issue comes out before that, whether it's December and it's in February or it's November, where I'm not even sure where we've locked in our 4 issues yet on which months. We could say, wow, we went there last year and it was a good time. It's the same reason there's no point in doing reviews. With a quarterly magazine, it's very difficult to be timely. What I would like to see us institute at some point down the road, I got to remember to keep looking at this. Tell me, look up. At some point down the road, I would like to see like a column of large conventions in the next quarter, when we could reasonably be assured that they're going to have them, and the first month is still going to be valid. So that's all part of the aches and pains we're working out of this first one, hitting our stride with timing and that. But other than that, I personally blog whenever I go to cons. I go on Dragon's Foot. I put it on my blog on Eldritch. And I always enjoy writing about the cons that I go to. I started a few years ago as an homage to Hunter S. Thompson. They're all titled Fear and Loathing in or Fear and Loathing at. And then I write up this long stream of consciousness as I remember the convention. And they get a lot of hits. So I'll just continue doing that.
Well, talking of conventions, your first ever game of D&D was at Gen Con. Was it 74?
1974.
1974.
Yeah.
So, can you take us through that game that day, and can you take us through your first game and then the second game that you had that day?
Okay. Well, I was there because Gary had told me about this get-together of, at the time, I think he said, man, there's a couple, 300 of us. Well, my biggest gathering of gamers had been my club, which is about 20 strong. And so I said, I got to go. I got to go see 300 gamers in one place, And so, and he'd been telling me all along about this new game he was working on, because I met him through the context of chainmail. But he'd been telling me about this new game he was working out. And so I had the rudiments in my head. And naively, I thought I'd find a hotel when I got there, and I realized I didn't. So I'm going to game until I drop, and then I got to drive 4.5 hours home. I figured I'd just drive my head out the window, keep me awake. After all, it's gaming. And so somebody walked down. It was later in the evening. It's already dark. I remember that. Somebody was walking down one of the hallways at the horticultural hall saying, we need some players, I said, oh, that's that thing Gary was talking about. I've been playing miniatures all day. And so I said, okay, sure, I'll go. And I raised my hand. So, okay, here, you're a fighter, and you got a sword and a shield, I'm okay, cool, this sounds good, And there was about 6 or 7 of us, I guess. And so I got stuck in the back and said, watch the back. So that's all I did. Is okay, I'm watching the back, and I'd tell him every once in a while, I'm looking behind us. And I don't know why, apparently while I was looking behind us, something happened up in front of us, because the next thing I know, and I really don't know what's been going on because I'm also literally sitting in the back of 3 rows of chairs, so I'm not catching everything. All of a sudden, I find we're encased in some enormous block of gas permeable lucite of some sort because we're not suffocating, but we're completely, we can't even blink. We're so immobile. I'm just sitting in the back going, wow, what just happened? You know, I'm completely bewildered and befuddled. And so we're drugged before this enormous bank of what must have been lights and dials and knobs and levers and whatever. And it didn't go well because, again, I couldn't hear what was going on. But it was announced that we had all been cut up with laser beams into 1-inch cubes and made into paperweights. And I'm just, and this is like 35, 40 minutes into the thing, and I'm going, well, that was certainly different than anything I've ever done before.
Did you enjoy that first game, or was it just a case of...
I really didn't have any idea what had happened because I couldn't hear her half the time. You know, we're in a large hall, and there's games going on all over, and there's movies going on out in the garden area in the center, and I just kept missing snatches of the conversation. So, all right, but the heck. Well, I'm still not ready.
Sorry, your very next game was with Rob Kuntz, who was shouting for volunteers.
I think it was. I believe it was. I'm still sitting there scratching my head, and I'm not ready to leave yet. So a young man comes through getting players together again. And I said, well, okay. I looked at my watch. I got time. The last one didn't take very long. So I signed up. And this time I was a dwarf. I like that idea. And I had an axe, and I was wearing chainmail, and I had a shield and a helmet, and I'm getting into it now. And I'm up in the front. All right, let's do it, you know. So I'm just telling him what I do. And, of course, none of us had dice, so he's doing all the dice rolling and everything. I'm chopping at him. And in the course of about, I don't know, maybe 2 hours that adventure lasted, we rescued a dying dwarven duke or something. And as I was the only dwarf in the party, he gave me this, like, medallion of office. Now, all I had to do was go find his duchy or dukedom, and I had 100 fighting men at my disposal, and I had a castle underground. You know, of course, he's a dwarf. And this was like hitting the jackpot, because the whole point of D&D was to adventure up to get enough money to build yourself a keep, go out and carve yourself a kingdom out of the wilderness, build yourself a keep, and rule it as a lord. Second game, I'm a lord. Wow, this is too cool. So I went back in, I bought the game. I bought the box, the little brown box, and I bought a set of dice. And I took them back, and I infected my game group at college several weeks later. So that's how I started.
And how long did the infection take? Because the original rule book was not the easiest to get through and piece together in your mind, was it?
Well, actually, my comments to Gary about how difficult the rule book actually were is probably what led to me being considered for a job there, because he knew I was a reasonably intelligent fellow, and I was having a miserable time. What I thought, I told my game group, 2 weeks from now, we're going to play this new game. Oh, what's it like? We'll play it. Be quiet. Well, 6 weeks later, I finally had worked my way through the book. I made all the classic mistakes back then that everybody did, and every room had something in it, you know. It was just, but it served us well to get the guys interested and to basically form the core of the game. But I was calling him frequently, going, because, you know, how's it going? How's it going? And I go, man, I haven't even started yet. You're killing me here. And so I'd have to ask him questions. Oh, yeah, well, what we meant was, okay. And the other thing that today people, the new players that have never seen the old ones or learned on the real new ones and then saw the old ones, the game was designed to be played by miniatures players. So it was written murky to begin with, because all miniatures rules were murky back then. They were just, today they say whether a game has crunchy bits or it has any grit. It was all grit and crunchy bits back then in miniatures rules. Chainmail was one of the simplest forms of rules on the market. It was terrible. But they didn't take long to get hooked. And then we became essentially a playtest group for Gary. And as soon as Greyhawk came out, I got it. And I would speak to Gary every 2-3 weeks, once a month. And we'd talk about what came up. And his response was always, I'd say, well, we got to a sticky part here. And he would always go, well, what'd you do? He would never say, well, you should have, or no, it was always, what did you do? And then and I didn't know I was a playtest group at the time. I didn't know the term. But I realize now that, yeah, we were testers, and I use testers now, so I understand it. But we were testers, and I was in close contact, and that one thing led to another. We started talking about a job around the first of the year, and they had expansion plans at that time. They knew they needed to bring in a copy editor, and another warm body, basically, because we all did everything. We packed orders and everything, swept the floor. And so I went back to Gen Con in '75 and sat down and talked with Brian, and then I went to work for him 7 weeks later. And actually, I went to work before there was a TSR because the papers hadn't been all filled out yet, so my first checks were from Technical Studies Rules. Should have kept them. Boy, if I'd have kept one of those checks, wow. The people that buy ephemera would just go crazy over something like that.
Oh, speaking of ephemera, you've got 2 original Trampier originals, haven't you?
Yes, I do. And I don't know that Dave ever gave any others away. There may be some out there. I'm unaware of them. It may have happened after I left, but Dave was very... His art pieces were like his children. He was very protective of them, and generally it agonized him to let him out of his sight long enough for the printer to do the separations and that. But yes, I have the only double cover he did for the Green Magician story. It's a Celtic cover, and I have the back cover of the Christmas greeting that we did in an early dragon that has all of us TSR people in the sleigh being pulled by flying dragons. Gary and myself and Jake and Rob and Tom Wom and Dave Sutherland and I'll probably forget somebody. Joe Orlowski's butt. You don't see his face, just his butt falling out. Yeah, I have those in my basement. They're very. I would never ever get rid of the Christmas one, ever, because that was a time when that was a golden year. Jake was there with me at the magazine, and Tramp, and Wom, and Sutherland, and Rob, and Gary. It was a golden time.
Okay. Well, moving on slightly time-wise, Holmes D&D was the successor to the original D&D box set. Mm-hmm. And during our last conversation, you talked about originally you didn't think, or didn't really look into the Holmes D&D all that much, but of late you've gone back to it and you said it was quite a profound rewriting, I suppose, of the not the rules at all, but the text to make it much more understandable. So could you go a little bit more into your thoughts on Holmes D&D, how that came about, and also the bridge where AD&D came about and D&D was split?
Okay. The necessity arose because we had been publishing supplements frantically, trying to tack on areas of gameplay that we had not foreseen. And so the supplements had been patches, just a patch here, a patch there, a patch there. We were trying to hold the thing together without having it explode. I got to look at this camera. I'm sorry, people. I'm top of my head. Is there anybody out there watching this?
Yes, there are.
Oh, okay. Oh, luckily for me, crowds don't make me nervous. So they make me forget where I was at, though. Oh, okay. So the game had gone in so many different directions that it was kind of time to, all right, let's bring this back and recodify it a little bit. It was partially an effort to standardize it to allow for competition, and in a small part, but in a major part, it was an attempt by TSR to take the game back from all the people that were trying to take it in different directions. That's a topic for a whole nother night's conversation. And it was also an attempt to make it easier. We noticed we had a lot of younger players showing up at the cons, and we thought, well, shoot, it's not like we went out to ensnare children. But we also realized that if we're going to do the advanced, it's not, basic wasn't just for little kids. Basic was for anybody who want to get a feel for what this is like. Now, it was less bloody, it was less violent, and so Dr. Holmes did a great job of filtering it for a younger mind. We'd already gone through a period, and we're going through a period of backlash from the religious fringes. We were devil worshippers. We were promoting black magic. We almost killed the brand with the cover on Eldritch Wizardry with the naked lady on this cube that you can't see any bits, no naughty bits, but we almost killed the brand with that.
It's very ironic given Gary's religious propensity.
Well, yes, exactly. But Gary always said they just can't seem to disassociate the fact that it's fantasy. Come on, it's fantasy. It's make-believe, So there were multiple reasons there. So Gary came in on a Wednesday or a Thursday one week and said, "What's your next week look like?" And I believe the magazine was supposed to wrap that Friday or thereabouts. And so I told him, I said, well, he said, "What's your next week look like?" And I said, "Well, just the usual." He says, "We'll clear it." I said, "Oh, where are we going?" He pointed to his office next door. He says, "There." Okay. So the rest of the week, I, cleaned up everything. The magazine came, or we either sent the magazine to press or it came back, whatever. The magazine was at a stop point. And I came in on Monday, and Gary had scavenged, including the ones out of my office, every cork board and every bulletin board, every blackboard in the store, in the whole building, and had them all tacked up all over on his walls. And we had six brown boxes sitting there, and we proceeded to cut those up over the next 6 days.
How many brown boxes were there?
6.
Good.
We cut up 6 complete sets, plus 6 Blackmores and 6. We cut up 6 of everything.
How many collectors do you think are crying right now listening to this?
Yeah, I know. Well, we cut up the old ones because they were the old ones. The white ones were already out, but the old ones they were old stock, and so they were like junky. That's old stuff. Shoot, I know. I cry when I think about it. That's about $20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of 6 or 6.5 days, we were not interrupted. Gary gave strict orders downstairs that we were not to be interrupted by anyone except our respective wives. That was it. No distributors, no printers, no advertisers, nothing. We were not to be interrupted. And we sat in there for all those days, and we cut and pasted, and we tacked them up on different sides of the wall. And when we were done, this was basic, and this was advanced. And then Gary went to work on the manuscript. But we decided things. How are we going to work this and so that's why the basic only has so many spells in their lower levels and all that. We pared those down. We changed the magic missile. That's my greatest achievement to AD&D.
I want to come back to Magic Missile in just a second.
Okay. All right. I want
to ask you about strategic review as well, and how strategic review became Dragon Magazine, because you were a part of that process.
I was hired to be Gary's editor and to edit strategic review specifically, and then, like I said, we all did everything. And this was all done in the basement of Gary's house on a couple of sheets of plywood on sawhorses. And I think we had his laundry table that we commandeered on occasion. And then upstairs, when we had to collate a game, we used his dining room table. And I was brought in because he liked to do other stuff in strategic reviews. It wasn't always just what he was doing. And he wanted to continue that because Strategic Review grew out of the Midwest Gaming Association and all those various groups that he was in. And that's what those guys did. They shared information. You know, they'd collect stories from their friends and put them together and then share them with the other groups around the Midwest. And he thought I might like to, you know, do that kind of stuff because I was a journalism major at the time, and I became a communications major at the time. So he thought I'd like to do that. So we started going afield in it. We started seeking out advertisers. And with the intent that we had already discussed that we would, at some point when it was opportune, when we had the money to launch it, we would start, we would take Strategic Review and make it into a full, slick color magazine, 2 magazines, in fact. We made it into Dragon, we made it into Little Wars. Dragon was fantasy and science fiction, and Little Wars was everything else. And our plan succeeded, and that's what we did. And from the beginning, they were both to be about everybody's games. We were adamantly opposed to becoming a house organ. There's nothing wrong with a house organ as long as people reading it recognize it for what it is. Yeah. Pushing the company line. General was a wonderful house organ for Avalon Hill. Moves was a good house organ for Strategy and Tactics and SPI. They were good, but they only ever wrote about their own stuff. Yeah. We thought there's just so much stuff out there we bet people would like to know about. And so that's the direction we went, and it proved to be very successful. I duplicated the pattern when I left TSR and started Adventure Gaming. That magazine was making money every issue right up to the one I closed it on. It was collecting the money. That was the hard part.
Now, Magic Missile, why does it always hit?
Oh, we spent a whole lunch. I think we were eating hoagies from the Pizza Hut across the street. We spent an entire lunch debating Magic Missile. As originally written, it was a pretty much slapdash thing. If you hit, it hit pretty good. And if you got big and you hit, it hit really good. But if you missed, no matter how big you were, it was a total miss. So we argued about it. I wanted to do a D6. You know, it does a D6, you know. Or I think I might have said, you know, we do anyway. I can't remember the various permutations of the argument. I finally got him to say, all right, look, these are wizards. You know, come on, how hard is it to flick a little something that stings? You know, I said, a couple of points. Knock over that ogre that's staggering around over there blind in the corner, you know. Pick that thing off out of the sky. He's a wizard. Of course he's going to hit it. All he's got to do is point his finger. And that's where Board Flag came from in The Adventures of Phineas Fingers. Board Flag and his little reticule sight that he had on his fingers for pointing magic missiles and shooting fireballs. That's where it came from. I won the argument. Oh, come on. Wizards ought to have something that works. Doesn't have to work well, but it ought to work. I ought to be able to start a fire if you shoot it into timber or tinder, you know. Does anybody realize that you can't throw oil and ignite it the way we have been doing it for these 40 years?
I did not know.
Oil does not ignite at that low a temperature. As a torch, you can't make a fireball out of a vial of oil. I mean, what kind of oil is it? Is it petroleum? Is it olive oil? You know, we always have flasks of oil. That's the big generic in role-playing, flask of oil. Find an oil safe to carry around with cork stoppers that will ignite with anything like a torch or a lantern. They're not hot enough to what we do with them. But anyway, that's a digression. I apologize.
Now,
we probably had that argument, Gary and I did, and we decided to go. Yeah.
You're also responsible, I believe, for the belay, the land shark.
Oh, yes.
What's the story?
My greatest achievement. Well, we had planned to start a column in the Dragon. Each month we were going to do a reader-drawn monster and new stats. So we're going to create new monsters, creature features, we were going to call it. Not very original. Every old scary themed black and white movie shower on TV late at night, had a creature feature, but it worked for us. Well, we were supposed to start in the second issue because we'd run something in the last strategic review about it. And I believe it was the Remorhas that ended up being the first real one. And I came up short a half-page ad for the first issue of The Dragon. It wasn't the fault of the advertiser. It got destroyed in the mail. I was getting negatives, and I got them, and they were mangled, and it was too close to the deadline. So I had a weekend. So I thought, well, okay. And I went to Gary I think it was Thursday or Friday that we got this mangled thing. And back then there was no overnight, there was no faxing, I mean, we're back in the dark ages here, folks, pony carts. And I went to Gary, I said, I think we're going to start the creature feature early. He says, oh, what happened? He said, all right, go talk to Dave. Well, in the meantime, I went and I said to Gary, he had the bag of monsters on his desk. The bag of monsters, the Rust Monster, the Umber Hulk, all those. I said, which one of these hasn't been named and today we'd say statted out. I said, which one of these hasn't been named yet? And he picks up the one that's about this big, and they simply called it the Bullet because of its shape. And the only thing it had done in a couple of adventures, it had run down a crowded hall and made people fall down. That's all it had done. So it really wasn't anything yet. So I said, okay, the Bullet, huh? Well, at the time, there was an anti-French vibe in the air. We like to ridicule all things France. And so I decided, the Bullet, huh? Well, we'll call it the Boulet. We'll Frenchify that a little. And I was writing it up on my typewriter that night, and Saturday Night Live was on, and they were doing one of their many parodies on Jaws. And they had a shark that tried to deliver candygrams. And you'd hear the music, and they knock at the door. Who's there? Candygram. And one night he said, land shark. And that's where he became the land shark. I heard that. I go, it's perfect. The raised sail in the back. I've already got them burrowing across, they can burrow. They'll raise that sail. That's how you see them coming, because they'll need that sail. That's their soft spot, their weak spot under there, so they kind of respirate through there when they're underground, and they dig out hobbits and they eat ponies. And the reason they dug out hobbits and ate ponies is because Gary and I were sick of hearing about hobbits and hobbit ponies. Somewhere along the way, somehow, hobbit ponies got this cachet of being able to carry 3 times the load of it. I don't know, but we were just sick of ponies. And hobbits were becoming annoying because everybody's playing a hobbit. And I decided, because it's mine, I decided, well, based on a conversation we'd had, I'm going to put something in there that likes to eat hobbits and ponies and make it an outdoor monster. And it's amazing. When I tell people I did that, they all shudder and go, that's why we don't go outdoors. Nobody likes to do outdoor adventures because they run into boulets. As it so happens, one of the finest painters in the world knew of my connection to the boulet, and Angela Emery. She's got more awards than I could fill all the shelves in my basement with, I think. And she did last year at Gen Con, she did a small diorama of a boulet bursting into a hobbit hole. Wow. Chasing the hobbit out. The hobbit's got eggs in his skillet, is dropping into the fire. It won first place, and then she turned around and gave it to me. Whoa, what's that, So yeah, besides my 2 Trampiers, I have a first place winning diorama.
And do you have the OD&D book that fan gave to you with OD&D all the way through?
It's not. If you want me to jump over and get it.
Oh, I just think it's an amazing book.
Well, yes, so do I. The gentleman I saw, he was playing in one of my games at TotalCon, and he kept looking at this green, untitled book, digest-sized book, and I'm thinking to myself, what book is so good he's got to keep reading it in the middle of an adventure? Well, he was not familiar with OD&D, and he was just referencing spells to find out what they did, and things like that. He wasn't arguing with me or anything like that. Very nice young man. And finally I said, what? And he showed me. I go, wow. He had the first 3 and the 3 supplements all bound into a book. He's a book binder by hobby. It's his hobby. And I said, oh, that's amazing. He said, would you like one? I said, would I like? Well, yeah. And then I said, but you can't sell me one because, I know that. And I'm not going to get involved in anything like that and get anybody else in trouble getting anything like that. He goes, no, but I'd love to give you one as a gift. What would you like in it? And I said, what do you mean? He says, the books. I said, well, if it's a gift, I'll be a pig. I'll take everything from chainmail to swords and spells. So I have the entire gamut of the digest, all hardbound. Mine's in black and silver. Frank has one. Frank Menser has one in maroon and gold. He presented them to us the next year he brought them to Gen Con.
Wow.
And just presented them to us, and I just blew me away. I guard it carefully at conventions. I guard it carefully, very carefully.
I've got, actually, I've got another question. It's just popped into my mind. I will ask it after this one here. But I want to just say 2 words to you, and I want to say the first thing that comes into your mind. Hit points.
Grossly misunderstood today.
Why?
Hit points in their original concept were simply a measure of your ability to avoid a fatal blow. It was not pounds of meat, pints of blood. The way it was being played, even in 78 and 79, these characters must have looked like something out of today's horror movies, just one massive scar tissue. People got into critical hits and chopping off fingers, and I know there are games that get into that. The concept behind OD&D was simply the ability to avoid the fatal blow. You could look at it as endurance. You could look at it as energy, speed, tricks, skill, all that factored into an abstract. That's why when you went up a level, you got a little better. It was assumed you learned a couple of more tricks, or that was the whole thing. Today, it's to my eye, it's way whacked out of where that is. Critical hits and losing limbs and phalanges, and it's like, wow, whoa, wait a minute, what good is that? If you are resurrected, what good are you if you lost a leg? Your leg's not there. If it's in the stomach of a crocodile that's 40 miles down the river when you're resurrected, it's not going to do you any good. It's just grossly, grossly, grossly misunderstood today. It's all it is. It's just the ability to and THAC0. All right, THAC0. A lot of people hate that. 2-hit, armor class 0. We use that in-house as a rule of thumb, and it kind of slipped into AD&D.
Yeah.
But that was an in-house measure that we were comparing basic with advanced, and apples to oranges. You can do that with a THAC0, right? When you're talking about just how hard is it to hit. And to hit is just a lessening of that creature's ability to evade the fatal blow. Now, by that same token, I don't have a problem with the people that love to say, a 20 is catastrophic. As long as it goes both ways. If you can slay the monster on a 20 outright when it's got a few more points than you'd normally do, fine, as long as the monster can whack you and kill you outright. It's got to go both ways.
Yeah.
But again, it's all a matter of hit points. What kills me is how dead is dead. Excuse me. How dead is dead. Well, originally it was when you got to 0, when you hit 0, that was it. You had not avoided the fatal blow. Now it's minus. Well, I let him go to -3. I let him go to -4. I let him go to -6. And I let them go to -4, but then every 6 turns they go to another point. Whatever, fine. It's okay if that's how you have fun. I won't criticize. I got out of the edition wars a couple of years ago. Don't care. However you want to play is fine with me.
So did you play Zero is Dead?
Yes, but it could be resurrected. Now, if you got hit, again with the looseness of the old way of playing, if you were down to like 3 hit points and you got hit by a boulder that hit you for 12, well, you probably weren't going in any shape to be resurrected. You were like squashed, flat, and pasted, literally into a paste. But then again, that was all interpretation. Yeah. Nowadays, I understand it. All you need is a fingernail scraping and some intestine. You can bring somebody back from the dead.
The original game is characterized by a very loose form of play, very loose rules that are very malleable to the situation that's at hand. And can you sort of describe the original game?
Yeah, ruling's not rules. Okay, and I have one of my signatures on some post I'm in. You should never let rules get in the way of the fun. Case in point, last year at GaryCon, I have a reputation for totally wiping out parties. TPKs, they're called here in the States. Total party killed. I had a party that was about half dead. And I told them, I said, guys, you're about half dead, and the rate you're going, it's not going to be long. So you better pull something out of something. Well, as it so happened, there was a dwarf in the group. And he happened to have a potion of giant strength. And, okay, he said, I'm going to take a potion of giant strength, and I'm going to go out and wrestle with those 2 polar bears. Now, as it so happened, I'd already put in a little mechanic, so if you're grabbed by one of these guards that were these intelligent polar bears, if you were grabbed by one, there was a mechanic which you might break free based on your strength. So I said, okay, we'll just reverse that. All right, and he drank it, and we determined it was hill. He became as strong as a 3/4 hill giant. Very strong, in other words. So he went out, he grappled the bear, he needed a 6. When it all came down to the final roll, he needed a 6 on a D6, and he snapped the bear's spine. And he says, well, that was fun. I'm going to go grapple the other bear. Because it's a convention. You do glorious things. And so he went over, he grappled the other bear. He needed a 6, and by golly, he rolled a 6. In fact, I rolled a 6. It wasn't even his dice. I rolled a 6. You did it again. So he's now known throughout GaryCon and other places where I've talked about it as Sigurd Bearbreaker, the dwarf that killed 2 polar bears hand to hand. Were there rules for that? No. But when you got something going like that, you're on a roll, you find a means to see, okay, sure, it's silly, it's improbable, but improbable stuff happens. People stub their toe and they find an emerald the size of an ostrich egg, and stuff happens. Well, he lucked out. And, everybody was talking about it by that evening. Who was the bear killer? Who was the bear killer? It was Michael Curtis, the guy that wrote the Dungeon Alphabet, and writes for Joe Goodman Games and others. Yeah, in fact, I'll see him next week. He's going to be my house guest here. Now, there's a night. He's going to be my house guest Thursday, Friday, Saturday in March, the first weekend of March. Thursday night, he's going to be my house guest here. We could do a dual show. You want to get Michael Curtis on here one night? Yeah. I'll bet I could get Mike on here. I'm picking him up at the airport about 4:30 or 5. If we hustled, we could get here and do it. Just a possibility.
Yeah.
Live from Tim Cast's basement, Michael Curtis.
Actually, leading on from that, is hit point inflation in the early days. It was. Tell us about the time when Odin and all of the gods were destroyed by players.
Yeah, it got real silly somewhere along the way. They saw that what we had done with magic, we had put in some mid and upper 20s, even into the 30s magic users and stuff, but they were mainly meant as NPCs because the bad guy should always be a little more powerful but have a weakness. I mean, that's just good fantasy fiction. And it was getting considerably out of hand. The best player I ever had continuously, etc. before I retired and reached 12th level. That's the best one I ever had. And I played a long time. And people are writing in, they're 17th level and bored, And we got a letter one day from a DM that was all upset. I don't know what to do with my group. They went to Valhalla last weekend and they killed everybody. They wiped out the Bifrost Bridge and they killed Odin and they killed Thor and they killed all the Valor and he's just bemoaning. What do I do now? And Gary and I are literally rolling on the floor laughing. It's like, what a dork. Why did you let them do it? And every one of the little books in the front has a foreword or a preface that says these are guidelines, not rules. And people were just uncomfortable with that. That was another reason they went to AD&D. They said, okay, if you can't handle guidelines, we'll give you some rules light. Because AD&D first edition is definitely rules light when you get in compared to some of the further ones. So even at the time, though, we thought AD&D was so rules heavy it would implode upon itself. I still play OD&D. But, okay, I got off the track there. Where'd I go?
Valhalla. Everybody's dead.
Yeah.
Gary was rolling around the floor.
That's why we decided we would put out Gods, Demigods, and Heroes. Because how could you possibly... And we gave Odin, as I recall, we looked up the other night, we gave Odin 300 hit points, and Thor has 275. And they have psionic powers, and they can fling spells off their fingertips and all that. And it's like, okay, kill these guys. Come on, let's get back to reality here. In our mind, in our concept, this is what the gods are. And there's no way men can get there. Not even demigods can get there. I mean, even demigods ought to give any normal player a serious tussle without luck involved. And if they don't, there's something wrong. That's what we're trying to rein in an aspect of the game that the game was spinning down an alley that we thought was destructive. So we tried to rein in that inflation of hit points. People always want more spells, more spells, more spells. Well, originally, if you wanted a new spell, you went to your DM and says, I'm going to think up a spell that does thus and such. And the DM said, okay, that's going to cost you so much gold and so many weeks of research or whatever. I had a guy in my original campaign that had about 12 variations on a fireball. Every one of them absolute legitimate usage. And he even did it so that he could pull any one of them out of the major fireball. So he didn't have to carry all of them. But if he carried the big fireball, I would allow him to do any of the other minor variations because he had researched it. Everything from lighting a campfire to a very large fireball that I let him develop. But that's how you suck money out of the campaign back then. You suck money out through research. You suck money out through exorbitant hotel, motel rates, exorbitant food prices, whatever. That was the thing that people didn't spiraled out of control too, was the economy. None of us are economists. Well, very, very few of us are economists by nature. That's one of the easiest things to let you spin out of control and take your campaign off into ridiculous areas, is when there's just too much specie floating around.
So a lot of the guys watching this they joined the game with 3.0, 4.0, Pathfinder, and I want to go a little bit into the printing process and the typesetting process, because a lot of the viewers, of course, are used to having the internet, desktop publishing, and they're not aware of what it actually entailed really to produce even those basic books back in the 70s, to getting them to finally into full color, to stapling, to proper binding. And what was it actually like for you? What did your hands look like after a day's work?
Well, yeah, we used everything. We didn't have typesetters. All right, we typed, and then there was a guy at the printer who actually set it in type, because we Veritype, because we were an offset printer. Then we got galleys of type, and we corrected those. Then we got those were called blue lines, even though they were on yellow paper. And then we got galleys of type, and we cut those with X-Acto knives and straight edges, and we ran them through a hot wax machine. And the word "hot" is the operative thing here. and we aligned them by hand on drawing boards, and we prided ourselves on getting within at least a 1/32 of an inch online. And at the end of the day, at the end of the paste up, it was usually 2-3 days, you had little wax burns all over your hands and lots of little nicks and knacks from the razors and from whatever. And yeah, you paid the price. But then when it was done, the printer came in, took it out, it was set into galleys, and bing, 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 you brought it back, and here we had it in our hands.
And today you're publishing with Eldritch Enterprises, which must be a world away from what you were doing back in the 70s.
Oh, I tell you what, if I had just some of the simple programs that I have on this computer now, I could have done my whole Adventure Gaming magazine myself. I wouldn't have needed a printer, or I wouldn't have needed a typesetter. I wouldn't have needed anything. I could have done it all by myself. Amazing, the graduation of the ability to do it. But then the funny thing is, I've come to learn with Eldritch, is the print on demand is the absolute antithesis of what we used to do by hand. You have to allow so much latitude and leeway for a print-on-demand printer that you would never allow if a product you're putting out yourself. And it really doesn't matter. I believe we're available through 4 outlets for PDFs and 3 for print-on-demand. And it doesn't seem to matter who it is. You can have 4 guys doing it, 3 will do a great job, but on that particular one, it just went... And yeah, so you've got to allow your sloppiest or your loosest, the most latitude printer, you have to allow for him so that it doesn't go bluey when it happens. I was appalled at how, when I saw a copy that we got back to take to cons, and I said, wait a minute, this is cut off. This, meaning it was slightly off center or off balance, because I have a exceptional eye for that. And one of my partners said, oh no, that's well within latitude. What? That's within latitude? So I'm not against print on demand, but I'd like to have a little more control over that than we do, but it's simply not likely to happen. I guess if a customer goes and gets a sloppy copy more than once, they'll probably find somebody else to try and do it. But we had to relearn all our technique and everything just to allow for that latitude.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about Eldritch Enterprises and what you guys are doing, who's working there, and what projects you've got going on, and what you've already done, in fact?
Yeah, sure. Eldritch Enterprises was formed by Frank Menser, who was 5 years at TSR after my 5 years at TSR. We just barely overlapped by a few weeks and never met each other then. And Jim Ward of Metamorphosis Alpha, Gamma World, Midship, he wrote some really dandy, I'm blanking on him now, he wrote some dandy sci-fi novels. And Chris Clark is perhaps the most amazing one of all of us, because he's been doing inner-city games for 20 years. The guy I don't know how his head doesn't explode. He has so many good ideas, and he's our techno whiz for us, teaching us as we teethe our way through print on demand and what we have to do, and holding our hand and telling us yes, it'll be all right. It really is that bad. So he's our techno guy, and we all write, we collaborate, we write our own stuff. Frank has out Lich Dungeon 1, Case of the Missing Magic, and Quantum Font. I've got a list of them here somewhere, but and then Jim has Tower of the Scarlet Wizard and Dark Outpost, and he's got another one out. Uh-oh, hang on. I'm not going to blow this. I printed up a list to take the convention, so I'm going to make sure I use the list. In fact, I can show you pretty covers.
Yes, please.
Oh, I can do that. Yes, I had to print up some cards that say if we sell out, the placeholders. So okay, all right. I have one called Snake Riders of the Arredondo. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Okay. Dynamite art on that. Young lady we discovered over in Sweden named Moa. Also did my second one, I'm trying to see where you can see it. Curse of the Weaver Queen. That's my newest one. Jim has Dark Outpost. There, I guess you can read it there. James M. Ward, Dark Outpost. He also has Tower of the Scarlet Wizard.
Very 70s looking, that one. Very 70s looking, that one.
Well, we do go for a retro look sometimes on purpose. No point in not, you know. This is a Case of the Missing Magic. That's Frank's. Some dynamite art on that. This is Frank's Quantum Fount. All of our stuff is written system neutral. That's Frank's Lich Dungeon. There, I get it so it doesn't glare off at you. Yeah. Chris Clark has Forest of Deceit. And, oh, he's got another one.
Cool.
Strange Allies, but I don't think that one hit print yet. And then we have an anthology out. Clark. Then we all write from our own perspective, and we all write in our own style. I tend to go on a great deal about what I'm now told is source material. I tend to go places where that, as far as I'm aware, other people haven't gone. Jim is a master at sci-fi. I'm going to collaborate with Jim on one. Unbeknownst to me, this Dark Outpost, there's a Dark Outpost, Dark Visitor, and Dark Planet, I think it's called. It's an arc. And unbeknownst to me, they named the planet after me in the first one. So I said, okay, in the third one, I get to design the planet, and it's going to be a planet to remember. So I don't know science fiction from anything, but I figure, well, if Star Wars, if they've got adepts that can manipulate something called the Force, I'll bet I can manipulate something here. And it'll be science, but it won't. Frank and I have got a couple of collaborations in mind. I've got two more in the Snake Riders arc that I'm going to do, Return to the Isle of Arredondo, and then Under the Isle of Arredondo, where I'm going to do an entire underwater, the whole venue is going to be underwater.
Cool.
Yeah, I did that a little in the Curse of the Weaver. I did you can teleport to other temples around various places. I just read a review. I didn't know this. This is why I hated English class when I was in high school. I didn't know this, but apparently all the temples that you can teleport to in the Curse of the Weaver Queen are related to elementals or elemental planes. Okay. I didn't know that. I had one that's eaten up by an earthquake or a lava flow, and I got one that's underground or underwater, but, you know, apparently they saw something. See, they're putting symbolism there. I didn't think I did. Oops. I got to watch that more carefully. So we're constantly bringing stuff out. We got a new concept. Jim has a deluxe edition of Dark Outpost where we're including a CD with the author's narrations and sound effects and stuff like that. Just something odd and different. I'm looking forward to doing mine. And of course there's, you know, extra maps or extra illustrate, you know, that's part of the package that makes it special. We only do 50, they're hardbound, and when they're gone, they're gone. That's just, you know, that's the only thing we do with deluxe editions, just 50 of them.
Okay. Speaking of deluxe editions, do you see Kickstarter as being a way of the future and print on demand, or do you see one or the other not being really long-term viable? A last question for the evening.
Oh. Now, we're talking about Eldritch, or are we talking about Gygax?
No, we're talking about it as a model to follow, because there's been quite a few failed Kickstarter projects or Kickstarter projects that are delayed far beyond term. Do you think it's actually a viable model to keep following for RPGs, or do you think it should be used occasionally only and print on demand? Do you see that sustainable for small RPG firms as well?
Well, I don't see an alternative to small guys doing anything except print on demand. If they can't float if they can't float 500-700 bucks to do some hard copies and take them to a con and pay the money for a table and the gas to get there and peddle them, that's their best. Alternative, I think. I believe that Kickstarter can be used well. It certainly hasn't been always in the past, but I do believe Kickstarter can be a viable funding method. I just think that from what I have seen, and I'm not an economist or an accountant, I just think some people that went into Kickstarter and are now kind of jammed up just did not have realistic expectations of what might happen. In some cases, it was more successful than they were ready for. And I'm sure the guy that did the Order of the Stick never figured that he was going to reprint every single book he ever put out. That was astonishing. I'm sure that Reaper hoped that they do well with theirs, but I don't believe anybody down there at Reaper will tell you with a straight face they expected to make that kind of money.
No, that was insane. That was insane.
For plastic figures.
Yeah.
Anathema 40 years ago. Only kids played with plastic figures 40 years ago. Little kids. All right. What's that?
I think that's a good place to leave it for this evening. Tim, I'd like to say thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you very much. And everybody who's been watching, thank you for watching. Thank you for all the comments. We're going to go read them now and see what you guys have all said. Thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you for watching Grognard Games.